Hi, I'm Nina Boski, and welcome to LifeBites, where each and every week we'll get you inspired in the areas of life, business, and media. We'll help you dare, dream, do, and be so you can get out of your head into your soul in order to tune in and take a bite. This week, we're getting you life inspired. Hi, everybody. Welcome to LifeBites, Life Inspired. Do we have a special show for you? As many of you know, we are always talking about different subjects, and this one is a very fascinating one for me because we hear this term all the time: narcissist, narcissism, he or she is this, and we kind of create these labels. So the woman that I have on this show today is Dr. Tracy Kemble, and she has a new book out called The Narctionary. She's a thought leader, she's an entrepreneur, she's a women's empowerment expert, and she's been working in this field of transformation for over 30 years, teaching people about life transformation. So welcome, Dr. Tracy.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. It's been an interesting, fascinating subject because I think that term, this is just my own personal viewpoint, everybody's calling everybody a narcissist these days. What in the world, how would you define somebody that is actually a narcissist? And I'm finding through your book too, there's lots of different narcissists.
Exactly. It's interesting to me because just yesterday I was on another interview for the Narctionary, and the host asked me the same thing. She's like, I'm getting a little concerned that this diagnosis of a narcissist is being thrown around so easy in our culture, and she asked me the same thing. So, like, can you bring some parameters into this conversation? And the answer is absolutely yes. In order for somebody to actually be a narcissist, they have to have a professional diagnosis, from somebody who specializes in being able to recognize the characteristics and the behavior of narcissism. So for us to randomly be this person's a narcissist, we need to have a lot of information under our belts. Now, that being said, the reason that narcissism, I think, is just exploding on both social media as well as our day in and day out, is that narcissism is something that we all need. We need to have something that is called healthy narcissism. And the reason that this thing has so exploded and gotten a little bit confusing is that narcissism is not like being pregnant. You're not, either you are or you're not.
Yeah.
It's a spectrum disorder. And so it goes from one extreme all the way to the other. In the middle here is called healthy narcissism, and we all have healthy narcissism. It's what allows us to keep the good in and the bad out. No, I'm not going to allow that in my life because I have self-value, right? Self-respect, self-efficacy. I know what's healthy for me and what's not. As narcissism moves on up the scale, what happens is that it then merges into something that is called narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah.
And narcissistic tendencies, if somebody is rooted in a personality trait, because we're talking about a personality disorder, if they're rooted in this personality trait, a person with narcissistic tendencies is a very difficult person. Like, they're the type of person that you leave and you're like, God, this feels just like arm wrestling all day long.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that each and every one of us, even the kindest and the best of you who are listening to this show today, can have an off day and act a little narcissistic, a little selfish, a little immature.
Yeah, I can imagine some people saying, "Oh my gosh, I sometimes can act that way," especially if you start to read it. What are the tendencies? So I like the fact that you're talking about that there is healthy narcissism. But
Exactly. And there's also slip ups. There's just also those days that we're jerks. But the difference is that we care that we're a jerk and we're aware that we're a jerk. And that means that we're not a narcissist, or we're not somebody with high narcissistic tendencies. That just means that we're having a jerk day and we need to dial ourselves back in and regroup, or go take a nap, or whatever it is that we need to do to get our healthy center back. As narcissism continues to go on up the scale, it then merges into NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And these are just very dangerous people that I'll give an analogy after I'm finished here. And then it continues to merge on up the scale to antisocial personality disorder, which is sociopath, psychopath. And these are just the type of people we want to stay away from.
Okay, so let's back up the truck here, because this also gets interchanged a lot. People are calling people sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissist. What's the difference between those three so people can really understand those definitions? Because I think
I'm going to put it in really layman's terms.
Okay, yes, good.
When you're speaking about somebody who authentically has narcissism, you're talking about somebody who lacks empathy, which, to put it in really simple terms, that means that they don't have the ability to step into your shoes and see life through your perspective, nor do they care. That's the difference. Like, some of us might be busy and we're just like, come on, and I don't get it. I can't relate to that. But we might try. Somebody with narcissism doesn't care. They're not.
Okay.
They don't.
So let me ask you a question, because I've seen it where somebody acts like they care, but the minute that they say it, let's say they ask you, "Oh, how'd you do today?" They turn around and then they make it about them. So it's kind of like a false caring.
It's called, in the book, it's under the F section, it's called false empathy. And a true narcissist does that. They read how other people respond. And it's a whole cycle and a whole conditioning and a whole, like, almost like a cult onboarding, that they'll do things to try to lure you in. So that does happen with a true narcissist. Versus some people who we just don't get it. They don't care to get it. So what's the difference between somebody with who has narcissism, an NPD, and a sociopath and a psychopath? So all of them lack empathy. They don't care. The narcissist will create non-punishable crimes of action. And
what do you mean by that?
They will gaslight people. They will perhaps cheat. They will lie. They will make another person feel like they're crazy. They will abandon. They will do narcissistic things to them. As it moves on up the scale and you start to get into sociopath versus psychopath, the way that I in layman's terms, describe it is a sociopath will think about the awful harm that they can cause to a person, but they will have a conscious thought to say, you know what, I don't look good in jail clothes, so I'm not going to do it, right? All the I. Where a psychopath doesn't even think about that. They will just say, I'm going to harm this person. I don't care about, I'm not even thinking about the ramifications of it, or the arrogance of it. I'll never get caught.
Never like a Ted Bundy or somebody like that just
Exactly.
was like, or yeah. So okay, that makes sense. So thanks for the layman terms, because you start describing in descriptive, mental disorders and stuff. I think a lot of people just need to understand kind of that difference. Some of the characteristics, though, there's a lot of different types of narcissistic behavior or tendencies, right? So I want you to go through them, but before that, I have a question for you. So let's say you have the spectrum of 0 to 10, and you want to be in the kind of the healthy area of, let's say, 1 to 5, or that 5 range. Is a narcissist born, or do they evolve to a narcissist?
That's a really good question. It's an important one. There's one thing I want to add really quickly that a lot of people don't understand, and it's why narcissists find victims, is that you said something very clear, is that, okay, healthy narcissism is 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the bad stuff ranges up there. What happens on this side of the scale?
Yeah.
It's something called self-love deficiency disorder.
Ooh.
And this is who we actually need to treat to stop the cycle of narcissistic abuse, which
So
is
it's
what
the opposite. It's like polar opposites. It's almost like, you know, in
exactly.
alcoholism or any kind of abuse, you know, of addictive behavior, you know, you have
Exactly.
the Al-Anon and you have the AA, you know, that is still, it's a disorder because the Al-Anon person who is enabling potentially that addiction is also needing some treatment as well. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's now define, because I was just blown away. There's all these different types of narcissistic, you know, tendencies, and they have different ways of expressing themselves. So what is the difference between a classic narcissist and just a narcissist?
Well, let me just answer your earlier question, and then I'll jump over to
Okay.
that. So you asked me the question is, are narcissists born? And the answer to that question is no. All of us come into this world as these beautiful empty canvases. I'm not talking about if a person has some sort of a brain damage or a chromosome issue. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
anything of that nature. I'm talking about for example, if you were to see somebody with high levels of autism, you could easily say, well, they have very narcissistic tendencies, they're only thinking about themselves. That's a different situation. But if we're talking about babies that are born into families, they come in as a clean slate, and it is their environment that creates them to have survival mechanisms. Every narcissist has some sort of an extreme trauma in their childhood that, as a way to survive, they resort into the narcissistic tendencies that, as they learn to survive more and more, it continues to go on up the scale. So they're not born.
Got it. So it's something that through their childhood and trauma. Now, let me ask you something, and this kind of leads into these descriptions here. But let's say somebody has a huge ego, okay? And they didn't necessarily have a lot of trauma. They just have a huge ego. Are you saying that could somebody develop it even later in life as well, right? All of the, or are you saying that there is a primal reason for somebody becoming a narcissist, right? And if you look at politics, there's a lot of what people would say narcissistic politicians out there, and I won't name any names, but there's multiple. Well, it doesn't have to be just, you know, but you hear that word a lot. Oh, he's just full of himself. He's such a narcissist, right? What what about that? Is there any ingredient there in terms of you know, evolving later in life? Or are you saying that, hey, you know, there had to be some type of trauma when they were a child?
Well, let me define trauma. You can have a trauma that, for example, come from an alcoholic family, come from a family where there was a narcissist, and you had to become the invisible person to survive. I mean, there's the child abuse. We always think of trauma like that, but
Yeah.
it's also in the world of narcissism, um, something that is called the golden child. And the golden child is a child who the parent of a narcissist, is it possible to overlove your child? What
Ooh.
conditions that child into, they worship that child, they believe that child, they train that child to, you're the best, what is the matter with you, you're the best, the best of the best,
Wow.
and nobody is to take second to you. And so they don't get the proper checks and balances of life.
Uh-huh.
And so therefore they enter life really believing that they are better, because since their childhood they've been told that they're better.
Oh, wow. That's a really, you know, I can see that happening. Definitely. I mean, that's a really interesting when you start doing a deep dive. I don't think I've been hearing this term so much, and I'm like, I gotta really, when I got your information, I was like, I've got to have her on the show because this is really an important topic. And also, would you say, and we got to get to the descriptions here, but would you say that social media has heightened that level of narcissistic kind of behavior or tendencies?
Absolutely. I mean, the number of people who find their sense of visibility by seeing themselves on their own phone, looking at themselves all day long, um, basing their self-worth on the number of people who like them. If you understand why a narcissist does the shenanigans that they do, it's all to get something called fuel. Imagine that somebody with narcissism, they're like, remember when we used to have our cell phone batteries,
Mhm.
that if we let that battery go too long without a charge, our phone will die. Well, people who have narcissism, they are like that battery, that if they are not on the receiving end of this constant praise and worship and recognition, and allow me to say that negative attention is still attention
Oh,
for a
wow.
narcissist, very important to know, that they will begin just to feel like they're going to wither away and die. And so that is why they are in a constant state of creating chaos, drama, tears, crying, over flattery, showing off, interrupting. I mean, all these things that they do is to get that fuel source. Well, it's not that every person on social media is narcissistic, but if you look at um your your feed for the day and you don't get enough
Likes, is
recognition,
that
and it,
recognition?
yeah, and it affects your sense of self-worth, you're
Mm,
in trouble.
yeah.
You need to go do some self-love work, because that is feeding that sense of narcissism, unhealthy narcissism, that can rest in all of us just for being born in the world, in a competitive world at that.
Yeah, it seems really interesting what you're talking about because we almost have a built-in kind of avenue to move from that 5 range up to the 10 range if we're not careful and have that self-awareness. So let's define what are the different narcissistic definitions or styles?
Well, that's one of the things that's so confusing about narcissism, that when you're talking about, originally when we think of narcissism, we think of the classic narcissist, and that's a person who walks in the room. You know, the original story of Narcissus is where he looked in the pond and saw his reflection and said, "Oh my God, who's this amazing person? Oh, it's me." Okay, so this is like centuries and centuries
I love that analogy. That's great.
of an old word. But what's new is the diagnosis of what being in the constant environment of a narcissist does. It causes something that's, called narcissistic trauma abuse syndrome. It causes not PTSD but CPDSD. So all of these are new, and the actual understanding of not just, okay, that person has narcissism, but this is a person whose tendencies are harming other people. That's what's so new on the market, and that's
Mhm.
why all these victims are out there talking about what's happened to them and what they do, because there's a good chance that they have been with somebody who is a narcissist. But here's the thing: that classic narcissist that can't get enough of themselves, hearing, thinking, seeing, is not the only type of narcissists that are out there. And as we've been learning more and more about this condition, there is a narcissist that's called the cerebral narcissist. And we've all met a cerebral narcissist, and that is the person who is completely convinced that because they have a higher education than us, that they look down
Oh.
their nose and they speak to us as though we're stupid. And that's a form of a narcissist. There is something that is called the altruistic narcissist. And an altruistic narcissist is somebody who bases their entire life on doing good for others.
Oh, yeah, I've
Uh,
heard about that. That's what yes.
yes, and they don't do it because they're authentically altruistic. They do it because they love the praise and recognition and have people just adore them and whatnot.
Now, Dr. Tracy, I have to say, being in the transformational space myself, you obviously for, all these years as well. Do we know a few of those?
We do. And I tell you, it can, I didn't jump into the online recovery world or transformational world for a long time, because I just sat back and watched so long, and I would see people who would take one or two classes and then get out there and say that they have the tools, and they regurgitate somebody else's work, and they're doing it just to either make a buck or to get their face out there. And I'm like, this is dangerous. We're dealing with people's hearts and souls and
I agree. I'm
lives.
right there
Come
with
on.
you, and you have good business people potentially making a lot of money, but they don't have the inherent tools and gifts and wisdom really to be able to be talking about these important subjects. So, okay, so keep going. I know
Okay.
there's more.
Well, that was a perfect lead into the next type of narcissism, which there is a form of narcissism that's called the covert narcissist.
Mm.
And the covert narcissist is kind of a cross between an altruistic narcissist and a covert, which is a covert. There's somebody who they seem very meek. But the one way that you can recognize them is they are the perpetual victim, that
Ooh.
somebody's always picking on them. Life is never for them, that they're constantly getting their fuel source by putting themselves as the victim and other people as the monsters. So
I'm starting to, as you're saying that, I'm starting to think about in my own family, right? My grandmother, she either loved you or she didn't. And when she didn't, right, there was always this kind of harshness. But one of the things that's coming forward is that she was always sick. And there was always the victim. It was never feeling well. How are you doing? Oh, like that. So, would that be a form of this type of narcissism?
it
Narcissism.
is. It
Okay,
is.
wow.
And we can so easily, narcissism is somebody who is very self-centered. That at the end of the day, the conversations go back to them. And it can be through them ranting or raging or talking about themselves or being so sick that, that they have to own the entire room. One of the things I want to talk about going back to the transformation is that you've touched on this, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it as well,
Mhm.
being in the industry, is one of the things that we have to be careful of. And I know that you have the people who are listening are people who are passionate about expanding themselves, et cetera, et cetera. It is so important to vet the people that become your trainers or your gurus or your teachers, because out there dealing every single cult leader is a narcissist, and they come at you with these false promises of love and connection, and they slowly start to pull you into their world and away from the outside world. So if you're with any type of an organization that is not celebrating you expanding beyond them, be it a single
Oh.
therapist or be it a community or a club that you're with, you are not dealing with professional, you're dealing with a narcissist. Because a true therapist, a true thought leader, a true transformational expert wants to see you grow to the best definition of yourselves, and they understand that they are not your god or your programmer, that they are just a stepping stool to get you to your next phase of the greatness.
I love what you're saying. And another way that I see it as well is very old school tactics of sales. And it's kind of a put down in order to put you into fear in order to buy.
And
And
that's a very narcissistic
I,
technique. It's in the Narctionary, that exact.
yeah, exactly. And I'm sitting here going, I can't tell you how many, if you're more evolved, you're going to, as a transformational guru, leader, etc., you're going to understand that. I always think, especially now, it's alignment. Is it in the right? If it's a fit, they're going to come to you. And if it's not, invoking more fear that their business is going to fail, they're going to fail, they're going to lose everything if they don't buy from you. I think this is really important advice for people that may be listening to this, because they may be in a situation right now where they're getting pressured. This wasn't in necessarily transformational space, but the psychic space. And that's a very vulnerable place too, because supposedly they're supposed to see the world. The client come to me in tears. Oh my God, this psychic told me, it was like horrible. And I thought to myself, my God, you've got to have wisdom in what you share with people, because if not, you are abusing your gift. So thank you for that, because that's an
Yes.
important
And if a
note
psychic
too.
ever, I believe in spiritual gifts most definitely, but if a psychic is ever putting fear in you and asking you to pay for the next step to be able to be cured of that, you are not dealing with somebody who is operating in the gifts. You're dealing with somebody who is a con artist, and con artists are narcissists.
Wow, that's powerful. So, all right, so back to because there's more. There's more types of narcissists.
Yes, in the book I have over 350 terms and
I
words
know. I was
that
like,
are
wow. I have such a list. I'm thinking to myself, I hope we get through them all because I thought there's so much to learn about this subject. It's so fascinating. Okay, so
yeah, and if you have any words that you want to throw out
oh,
there,
I do.
it would
I
be
do.
it would be fun. So I run a recovery program. It's called the Reclaiming Me program, and it's an actual a 1 year comprehensive program. I was raised in a family, and I love my father. I love my father to the end of the earth. My father has narcissism, and to this day, we're able to have the best relationship that you can have with somebody with narcissism. I chose not to go with no contact. It's taken so many years of being able to understand what I'm dealing with and not taking it personal. I then
Oh,
did
that's such a big one though, what you're saying. And I just want to take a step back from that because there's going to be people listening here. I even know people that have fathers and mothers who are narcissistic and, they're making those tough choices right now. What would you say to somebody that is on the fence? Because I think that you made that choice, but how did you come to that choice and why?
through a long series, and then just allow me to say that led me into marrying into narcissism. And so this whole recovery journey is based because I walked through my recovery from having my life destroyed because of the aches and pains of narcissistic abuse. So before I'm a healer, I'm first a client of myself. So
Yeah.
that being said, I had many, many painful years of having a narcissistic father because, all of us have the hopes and dreams of having a parent that we see other parents, the way that they parent, or we see things on TV and we hear stories. We're like, wow, that's not my gig,
Mhm.
And so the way that I did it is to make a very long journey short, is that as I entered in, I really realized my father's condition. I made a choice for my life to step back and love him for a distance. And during that time, I worked on myself. And I came to that point in time to say, how much of a relationship can I really have with this person? And of course, all healing says no contact, no contact, no contact. For me personally, I understand that I have one dad on this earth, and I chose, because I did my recovery work, to understand my father has a condition. I expect nothing from him. I put him in 0 point of power in my life. I understand that we have to have limited conversations. I understand that if I bring something up, he's going to make it about him. And I understand all this, but I don't expect anything in return. And most important, be it I'm with my father, be it I'm with the other people in my life who I have to be with because of life circumstance and have narcissism, be it's somebody that you work with that has narcissism.
Oh, that's a whole other, I mean, we could talk about that all day long in terms of
Yeah,
life,
and I'm
right?
gonna have a workshop that I'll tell you about before we close the phone
Right.
or close the meeting. I put on my emotional fire suit. And there are certain ways that I behave and certain vulnerabilities that I simply do not expose, because you cannot expose them to a narcissist, because they will either use it against you, or you want their validation and they're going to do something to hurt you with it. And so you don't. So you end up having very limited relationships with people with narcissism. But if you first, you have to do your recovery work. You have to be able to recognize their, what I call, some people call them their abuses. Yeah, they're abuses, but they're also just shenanigans.
Mhm.
The end goal of every narcissist is to get a reaction out of you. And so if you position yourself to understand, this isn't about love. I know you signed up for love, but you're not love, you're a fuel source. Ouch.
Wow.
Yes, ouch.
Ouch. Ouch
But
is right. But I think you have to face reality instead of trying to live in hope land, right? Because I think all
absolutely.
of us like to live in, oh, there's always the possibility that this person can change, right? And
That
uh,
is such a good point. And here, let me answer that question. Can a narcissist
yeah, I
change?
was going to ask you that. I didn't want to, because I'm asking you questions and then we go to another subject. I want to make sure we get it all in. So yes, so that's a great. That's exactly what I was thinking.
So can a narcissist change? Well, listen, you're dealing with a personality disorder. You're dealing with somebody who is much like an alcoholic. Can an alcoholic get sober? The answer is yes. But for the alcoholic to do it, the alcoholic has to say the big words, I have a problem. I have a problem and I'm hurting myself. And my God, I'm hurting the people around me. And I don't want that. It is so difficult for a narcissist to look at themselves and say, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. To have empathy, to say, I'm hurting the people around me. They don't think that way. Is it possible? If they can reach that point, but out of all the personality disorders, it's the most difficult because they do not have the ability to look inward. The only time I've seen people with high narcissistic personality disorders get help is, again, it's very selfishly. It's when they lose almost everyone and everything in their life and they say, well, I don't like this. So I better learn how to better get along with people. But it never goes away. They can
it's
go.
interesting you should say that because I remember reading a book a long, long time ago. I come from the media industry in general, and there was a book by a guy named, I think his name is Peter Barton, and he was one of the kind of pioneers in the cable industry. Very type A personality, very big ego. And his book was, I think it was called Not Fade Away. And I remember it being jaw-dropping because a lot of media executives at that time, I didn't see a lot of introspective of themselves, a lot of big egos, etc. And he was one of them. And it wasn't until he knew he was going to die that he started to shift.
Yeah.
And that book was all about that. And it was really a 180. And I thought, wow, if he could do it, how many other people could? But you have to have a pain picture in that to actually, drop the ego, so to speak, right?
Exactly. It's, the ego in all of us is our big arm wrestle for life, right? And so can they change? Um, it's very difficult. They can perhaps dial it down. Narcissism never truly goes away. So
Yeah, because it's a spectrum. So there's there seems to be that healthy side. This would seem very difficult. You said you then married a narcissist. Let's say you have children with a narcissist, and then you decide, oh my God, I got to get help. This isn't where I want to be. And you divorce the narcissist. You still have children with this person. How does that work? And how do you deal with a narcissist if you have children? I mean, that's
yeah,
a big one.
well, that's my program is a 6-part module, and the first module is all about like, what is this? The second module is what happened to me, and I talk about all of the shenanigans that they do. The third module, I talk about this condition called CPTSD that we
And
need
say
to
what that is again, because it's different than PTSD, right?
It is.
Okay, so
It's something called complex post-trauma stress disorder.
wow.
And the best and quickest way I can describe it is when you get PTSD. For example, I have a friend who was in the Las Vegas shootings and
Ooh.
she got hit by shrapnel.
Mm.
And she would have flashbacks and fear and all these emotional complications from it. But she was able, on her recovery journey, anybody with PTSD is able to say, I am feeling this way because on this day at this time a gun went off and I got wounded, right?
Mhm.
Well, when you're exposed to years and years and years and years of mind manipulation, of love bombing, of implosions, of gaslighting, of all the different shenanigans that the narcissist does to extract fuel, that it's hard for our brain to say, because of this, I am reacting like this. So complex post-trauma stress disorder deals with people. And then there's something called abuse amnesia, where if you were to say to many people who have been with a narcissist, well, why exactly are you upset? They'll be like, well, I just know that it's bad. And they have a hard time grabbing hold of that ghost.
Yeah.
So the treatment to complex post-trauma stress disorder, specifically for all these 1,000 puncture wounds that the victim has taken, the target has taken, being able to create that into one ghost to be able to hold on to it and begin the healing journey, having something specific to hold on to. Because recognition is one of the signs of healing from narcissistic abuse trauma.
Do you have to be out of the situation to start healing, or can you start healing even in the situation?
Most people, I work with both. I think that, most people get help when they're in the situation. And, when I went for help the very first time, I walked into the therapist's office, and the therapist did what therapists do. Why are you here? And I said, um, because my brain feels like it's made of mush and I feel I'm invisible. And
Mm.
that's the only way that I could describe myself. And it took probably a year for somebody to say, I think you're in a narcissistic relationship. And that's why so many people suffer. And I was in it when I began seeking help, and I was seeking help for invisible, for depression, for anxiety. And, you got to work on your codependence, you got to work on your boundaries, you got to work on this, you got to work on that. Now we're able to say, well, what's happening in your environment? Tell me about, the people around you. And if we're doing all this work, why do you show up every week with bullet holes still in you? What's happening here? So it's you need to get help if you're hurting, period, be it in the relationship or outside of the relationship. And don't be afraid of, people saying, well, there's no contact. My organization doesn't do that because, you're dealing with human beings that have financial reasons why they can't leave, religious reasons why they can't leave, fear, paralysis, emotional trauma, why they can't leave, children, why they can't leave. And so I think to tell a person, just no contact it's a nice concept, but it's not possible for most of the people that I work with. Going back to your question, and so I have my fifth module is called The Family and the Narcissist, when no contact is not an option.
Mm.
And in this particular course, we talk about how do you co-parent with a narcissist in or out of the relationship. We talk about the what type of a fire suit do you have to put on if you choose to stay? What can you expect if you stay? Will it get better? Perhaps a little bit. If you start to put on boundaries and the narcissist realizes that they can't control you anymore, it will probably get worse before it gets better.
That is just what I've noticed with if they're a true narcissist, it usually isn't going to be met with, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you shared that with me. It's gonna be the opposite, right? I mean, it's pretty strong. And I think that's also very scary place to be if you don't feel emotionally safe. And like for somebody like yourself who grew up in that, on one hand, it's what you know, and the flip side of it, you're going from one fire to the next, right?
And if you don't do your work and heal, you will only continue to attract because a narcissist, because as you said earlier, the self-love deficiency disorder and narcissism are two sides of the same coin. They are the same energies. That's why they align and attract with each other. And healing, I always say that self-love is the only antidote to healing from narcissistic abuse trauma, because when we heal, we begin to raise our vibration, and then the two just don't match anymore. And what happens is so many women say, I can't live without him. I felt that like the world was going to swallow me up, and I didn't have the skills to be out there alone without my narcissist and whatnot. But my big click moment, I had done a lot of my own personal work. I was still in there trying, and I was asked a question that was a real eye opener for me, and to say, okay, you're long on your journey. You're doing really well. You know how to hold on to yourself when all the shenanigans break loose. Is this really the type of love that you want?
Mm.
And thinking through that question, I said, is this even love? This isn't love. This is survival. And is it really how I want to experience my life existence for the rest of my life? I could. I had the tools to do it. The question was, is that really what I want for my life experience?
Yeah, that's a really, and that's, it takes some self-reflection and that awareness. And I think that is a process. And it sounds, because what I'm hearing from you, it's not like you're going to wake up one day and all of a sudden be healed. This is a challenging situation, particularly if you grew up in that type of environment. And, I'm thinking about it like, my mom was this sweet, loving person. And I've got a grandmother over here that, in a level of the description of that victim, kind of narcissist, it really primed me to have to learn that self-love, because without it, you're constantly giving, and it's never enough. It's never.
Exactly. One of the descriptions that I like for people who are in recovery is to say that loving a narcissist is like filling a glass of water with holes in its base. It's just always going to drain out. They just always need and it's just exhausting to be with that way. And I go back to that question, is that love? Is that the type of love that you want for the rest of your life? And for me, I reached a point that I said, no, I want love with reciprocity. I want love where my first voice can be spoken and absorbed.
Yes, and cared about. Like I want to listen to you. There's a term called, the energy vampire.
Yeah.
Would you say that an energy vampire is a narcissist?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And a lot of times they're the covert narcissist, where, the way that I describe narcissism is for anybody who has ever had a child around 3 years old, where if they don't get their way, they throw temper tantrums. Yeah. And they're energy exhausted, mom, 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 what? I hate my name. What? Right. That an adult narcissist, and it's in my Narctionary book, I call it adult temper tantrums. That the second they don't get their way, they just throw their temper tantrums. And it can be a temper tantrum where, and some of you are going to go a jaw drop when I say this, pouting. If you have anybody in your life who you say something and they pout, they put on one of their techniques that in my book I call it Mr. and Mrs. Breathy. And that's where you say, how are you? Fine. What's wrong? Nothing. They could scream, they can yell, they can get sick and crawl into bed, they can threaten suicide. I mean, these are all the shenanigans of a narcissist. And all you're looking at is an adult temper tantrum, somebody who is not getting their way. So they're going to throw a temper tantrum the way that they know best affects you until they get their way and their fuel.
Who would be a narcissist that withholds love and is more aloof, and they use that tactic? Would that be a classic narcissist, or is that some type of what is it, introvert or invert narcissist?
There's an introverted narcissist. All of them end up withholding love at some point, because what they do is they have something that it's called segmented love. And they'll say, okay, I love this, and this about you, but I can't stand that, and that. And if you do that, then I don't love you right now. And if you fit all my buttons, then I'm going to love you. So they're very conditional. They're very love handicapped individuals. And one of the easiest way that they can punish us is punish us through the withdrawal of love. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so every single narcissist, even the altruistic narcissist, those that are very wrapped up in the religious world, and this is what's coming to me right now, is if you don't behave this way in the name of God.
Oh yeah, you hear that a lot, especially out in the world, right? I mean, there's exactly. Wars are spent from that place, or created exactly. That place. So I'm hearing you, and I'm thinking about a media boss I had. She was known to have what they call a diagnosis of borderline personality. And yes. So it was very 1 minute Nina, I love you. Oh my God, you're the best thing. And then the next minute, it's like, whoosh, like that, right?
Yes.
So is all people like that a narcissist then? Or is it a combination? How do you really, because we throw around these terms, oh, borderline personality, bipolar, narcissist, I mean, how
Yeah.
do we know what we're really dealing with? Because that's a really
Okay.
difficult thing.
So there is okay, let me make a comparison that everybody will understand with. When we went through COVID, right? There
Mhm.
was the coronavirus, and then it went into COVID, and then it went into the next definition of it, and the next definition of the next definition. So personality disorders are this way. It's a personality disorder. It's COVID, right? But within there are different types. So there's the bipolar personality. There's the histrionic personality, there's the borderline personality. So there's these different personality types that are in there. There's a narcissistic personality disorder. All of these clumped together are in something called a cluster B personality.
Wow.
And that means they're a little bit of this, they're a little bit of that, they're a little bit of the other. And so a person can be a borderline personality disorder with high narcissistic tendencies, you
Got it.
see.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if somebody is just a narcissist and they're going along in life and they're in their benign happy state, and then something happens and they get a narcissistic injury, which is in the book, their personality will suddenly go from love to hate.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that bipolar? Is that borderline personality? Is that narcissist? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But one of my favorite terms in the book is called poop in your soup.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's a
Now, what is that? What is that
it's
for
a
people?
great descriptive for those of us in recovery that says being around narcissists is no different than having poop in your soup. And the smallest drop of poop in your soup is never okay. And so we need to remember that I don't care if it's bipolar, if it's this, it's that, it's the other, if it's a narcissistic industry, if it's an adult temper tantrum, I don't care. If it's narcissism, it's poop in my soup, and I don't want poop in my soup. You know?
Yeah, I love that. And it's really true because it doesn't really matter. The behavior is you've got to create a boundary or a healing or get into recovery with a program. And even with the book too, there's so many, I have got so many, what is an overt narcissist?
An overt narcissist is a very obvious narcissist. Many times you can recognize an overt narcissist because those are the ones that you're at a party and something funny might happen. You say, "That's funny," and they go,
Yeah, yeah.
and just always having to have the flashlight put back on them.
Got it. That's interesting. And then what is a narcissistic family system? What do you mean by that?
So the narcissistic family system is when you have one or more narcissistic parents in the family. And for example, if you have a narcissistic parent, then for sure you have a self-love deficiency other parents. So male, female, you choose. And just to let you know, I'm going to say there's only two environments that a narcissistic relationship can stay alive. It's a narcissist with a narcissist, and they either end up fueling off of each other's ego or breaking up because they're all fighting for the mirror, or it's a narcissist and a self-deprecate. And
Oh, yeah.
when it's that enabling, the same
Yeah.
side of
It's like
the
the addict with the enabler, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So within a narcissistic family, the end goal is, if you are married to a narcissist or partnered with a narcissist, is you will have childhood trauma come out of it, because every child who is in a narcissistic family, it is a stage play, and everybody plays their role and their part. The wife of the narcissist, just being sexist and saying male female, the wife of the narcissist, she plays the victim, he plays the abuser. Then it goes down to the kids, and there's the scapegoat child where they get blamed for everything. There's the invisible child, and that child will literally do anything to survive, just going quiet and riding under the radar. And then there's the golden child that gets all the attention, the accolades. And all three of these personality types, if you have more than three kids, all three will come out with some sort of trauma wounds by what happened to them in the initial stages of their life.
What would you say to whether it's a male or female who has now left a narcissistic relationship, but they have kids and they're realizing what you just said?
Oh gosh, well, they're probably having a sick feeling in their stomach and
Yes.
panicking. And I always like to say, I want to address two things really important: those whose kids have been turned against them because of narcissism, and those who now are owning the weight of the world of your children. The best thing you can do is get into therapy and gain some understanding as to what happened to you. First and foremost, you have to understand that you didn't get in a car accident, an emotional car accident in this relationship. You've been hit by a Mack truck. And there are serious, you may be still walking. There are serious trauma wounds that if you don't get treatment, you're going to get physically sick. You're going to get psychologically sick. You're going to suffer from burnout. You're going to miss out on your life. So first go in and get an assessment as to what happened with you. My book has a self-assessment test in it.
Yes.
So you can really understand how severe the situation is. Learn as much as you can about the condition that you've been exposed to and what you've done to learn how to survive and how you shape shifted out of survival. Have grace and mercy with yourself because you did it based on the tools that you had at the time. You didn't do it wrong. You did it with the only knowledge that you had, and good for you. Um, as far as what happened to the kids, once you understand what you went through, the best thing to do is to sit down with your kids one day and say, I'm sorry, I didn't know, but I'm better. There's a new me in town. I'm going to help you get well. We're going to get well. There's love, there's expression, there
Mhm.
is freedom, there are healthy rules, not limiting rules. There are other opinions, and just start being that new creation, and that will really
Help.
start to heal the children because the children will learn by example.
I
And
was just gonna say that too, because I would imagine, I think there's a really sometimes we think as parents we have to have it all together. And I think that if you're just really honest and saying that
yes.
was mommy or daddy then, and this is mommy now, and they are really seeing mom or dad heal, that healing alone will help them, like you said, through example, which I think is so powerful.
This past few weeks, I've been, I would say, almost 30 years into my own recovery, if not more. I I was thinking to myself, how the universe works when you start thinking and focusing on things, that there's a group of people in my life. And over the years, as I've continued to get healthier, these people have fallen out of my life. And there was this one person that was still in my life. And I said, wow, I guess, they've really learned to respect Tracy uh, 2.10 because they knew Tracy 2.3 and I know Tracy 2.10.
I love it.
And a matter of days after that, something happened, and there they went out of my life. And the moral of that story is healing is ongoing,
Mhm.
and that just like they upgrade phones and upgrade computers and upgrade technology, we too get the right to be upgraded.
Oh,
And certain systems don't work anymore for us, and it's not good or bad, it's just simply an is factor.
I love the wisdom here in your book, Narctionary. I would say to anybody that is either watching or listening this right now, if you're not sure yet where things are and where you're landing in this conversation, pick up her book and we'll put it on the screen. We'll put her website on the screen as well, because I think there's so many different terms there and awarenesses. Things were popping out of my, pages here and my notes. And I mean, I could probably have a whole day on this, So it's so fascinating to me. And just the acknowledgement of my grandmother. I never really thought of her as a narcissist, but when I was listening and watching this, I was like, wow, no wonder that trauma, even though it didn't feel like trauma in a childhood, I can see it now how it shaped me. And I think, healing and recovery and having the conversations and getting aware is so key. So tell us a little bit, they can go to the website. We'll put it on the screen, but tell us, what is the name of your 1-year recovery program? Because I think for some people, this may be their next step.
Great. So it's an ongoing program. It takes place on Zoom classrooms 2 nights a week, West Coast time and East Coast time. It's a 1-year curriculum, and it takes you from, literally a diagnosis of what is this thing that I'm dealing with, all the way to life after narcissism. How do we begin to dream again? How do we reinvent ourselves? What does, at that point, Tracy 2.5 look like, and how does she think? And I have people who come to the program and go through the whole cycle. I have, for 1 year, I have people who have remained in the program for years and years and years and still come in because they just
They need that
old.
support. Yeah.
Yeah, and trauma, it sometimes we're like a dishwasher. Sometimes we have to go through the cycle several times for it to go from here to here, because we're
Well,
dealing
we
about.
evolve, I mean, we're like onions a little bit. Sometimes I think I'm over something, and then something will happen. It'll be a new
Exactly.
version of myself, but it'll experience it from that new version. And now I get a chance to decide how I'm going to work with that in this new version of myself, but it still comes up. It's not like, oh, it stays out of my life forever just because I think I'm over it. So, and is it all live, or is it both, homework driven, or is it
Yeah,
maybe?
it's a comprehensive curriculum that we have a workbook that goes to it. The way that I structured the program is when I was along my recovery journey, and I went for help for many, many, many years, and I would make some, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 4 steps forward, do that thing, and then one day when this spectrum was described to me, and I realized, you know what? I've been spending years trying to figure out the narcissist, how to change the narcissist, how to make things normal within the narcissist. What if I got my eyes off of the narcissist and I only focused on my self love deficiency disorder? And so I began a recovery program on myself first. That I get downloads, and I got this beautiful visual download of a boardwalk. And on this boardwalk, there were planks, and what that showed me is that self love is like a boardwalk, and each plank represents a different thing that we need in our foundation of self love. For example, we need to have a no way zone. We need to have to be able to walk in self authenticity. We have the right to self actualization. We have the right to bear witness,
And we
which
have the right
means
to say no, right?
that's right. We have the right to boundaries. We have the right to live in peace. And each of these represent planks of self love. That self love operates in self kindness. Under my foundation, do I operate in self kindness? Do one of my planks in the program is the right to evolve.
Mm.
Self love gives you the right to evolve. So every week in the program, we lay down a new self love plank on our foundation of self love, connected into what narcissistic abuse trauma does to you. And the reason that narcissistic abuse trauma is able to enter our life is because we don't have those planks resting under our feet to
Yeah.
hold ourselves up. And the reason that we have to have more than just one thing, like I'm going to live with boundaries. Okay, you live with boundaries, but you don't have you don't have your first voice. You're going to be like on a tight walk. So I have 48 planks of self-love that are all destroyed due to narcissism, that every week we talk about um, a condition, an aspect of narcissism. From, okay, today we're going to talk about from abandonment to self-love, or we're going to be talking about from wounded empath to self-love. And it's very important that we do our psychological healing, our emotional healing, our physical healing. We also need to do some spiritual healing when it comes to this. We talk about our reactive anger. We talk about depression. So we have all these
All
subjects.
of these subjects. And I would imagine, I'm thinking back, gosh, where were you when I was 20? You know what I mean? You were, a little one yourself, but I think it's so useful for people of all ages to really, when I say all ages, meaning when you're an adult, you have that ability to start healing from this. But I think the sooner the better, because it took me a long time to become aware that it wasn't me.
Me too.
I mean, that was, and I think if we can give somebody hope, if you're starting to hear your situation in this dialogue today, reach out, get help, there is hope. I mean, I'm telling you, if I can recover, anybody can recover. And it sounds like you're the same way as well,
I'm 59 and I'm still at that
I
place
am too.
where
I am too. So we're
I
just,
could,
yeah, yeah,
okay, so you're
yeah.
beautiful. But I
So
still, walk around the corner and go like, oh, oof, there that is. Okay, come on.
well,
Which
because
tool do I need?
we're evolving, and I think this is such an important topic. I think it's a confusing topic for a lot of people, and I think that you've given us some clarity, and I think your book will also give some clarity and a point of direction of what kind of help you might need. As my last question before we close today is, what inspires you these days? What inspires you?
Oh my goodness. I it's funny that you should ask that because 2 years ago, because of all the stress I allowed my body to experience for the years of staying exposed to narcissism, I came down with cancer. I got the cancer and I, barreled through that and got it all
Wow.
behind me. And what inspires me today is just to know how beautiful life really can be and the power to be happy and the power to we are creators, and being in a place in my life where I have love and I have friendship and I have companionship and I have um, beautiful material things and I have adventure, and all of this happened because I'm not clogging my soul with the pain and trauma of another person and being their sponge and absorption. And when I made the choice to do that favor for myself, life became a really enjoyable place. And what gives me passion is to share the things that I've learned, to share the tools that you can get your power back in your life. And this journey, and as you said, you came out of a deep recovery, coming out of depression, putting all that behind you and just being able to wake up and understanding how great our life can be and the power, how much power we have to make that happen. Um, Sharing that roadmap is what gives me my passion today.
That's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. Her book, Dr. Tracy Kemble, Narctionary, and her website's right here on the screen. I want to thank you for being with us today. I'm Nina Boski, and this is Life Bites, Life Inspired. Until next time, remember, take a bite out of life before life takes a bite out of you.